I went into Ash really hoping to love it, but
Where am I? Who am
Ash was one of my most anticipated films heading into South by Southwest this year, but I did leave feeling a little bit disappointed. The film comes from multidisciplinary artist Flying Lotus, and it's a sci-fi horror thriller set in the future, but with a retro feel, full of eerie surrealism and a score from the man himself. So it should have really been up my alley. And there's a lot to respect here. Ash is visually aggressive and oddly funny at times, but it never fully lands for me. Instead of leaning into its weirdness, it sometimes settles for being a flashy but yet very familiar space survival movie. Still, a lot of people seem to really be into it, so I want to dive in at least a little bit more. The setup is classic sci-fi paranoia. Eiza González plays Riya, who is an astronaut, waking up to find her entire crew murdered on a distant planet, and she has no memory of what happened, just these flashes of very disturbing images. Then we have Aaron Paul's character Brion arriving to rescue her, but we immediately understand that we might not be able to trust him. And that's a pretty decent hook, but Ash never gets me to the point where I'm fully invested in this supposed mystery. In the first act, the stakes aren't set in any sort of emotionally meaningful way, and most of the second act just kind of meanders around. The pacing lags a bit, and by the time things start to get interesting in the last act, I had lost most of my investment. We're supposed to care about Riya, but we're never given much of a reason to, and the same goes for her relationship with Clark, another of the crew members that we see mostly in flashbacks. And at one point, Aaron Paul's character literally has to spell this plot point out, where he says something along the lines of, "Yes, if you were wondering, you two were an item." Okay, thank you. If nothing else, though, Ash is aesthetically intense. The film is drenched in neon. There are these flashes of violent cutaways and a cool kind of retro tech aesthetic. But these cutaways that are meant to be super unsettling and surreal often feel thrown in rather than perfectly timed and deeply embedded within the narrative structure, and sometimes it feels more like a look at me moment than anything that is truly unnerving. And to be honest, with Flying Lotus's track record, I was kind of hoping for something a bit weirder and experimental. I mean, this is the same guy who had David Lynch in one of his music videos. Eiza González is solid as the lead, but Riya's given such little depth that it's hard to fully invest in her journey. And Aaron Paul is Aaron Paul. His delivery is a bit off here, and while he can obviously be perfect in certain roles, there's no debating that, I didn't get too much from his character, specifically in Ash. The best moments here are probably with the film's satirical take on sci-fi medical technology, the responses the equipment gives when it completes a surgery or performs an autopsy are pretty amazing. And maybe the most surprising part is I found the music from Flying Lotus himself to be surprisingly conventional. There's some mechanical static and a bit of throbbing bass, but nothing that pushes boundaries, and at times it feels a bit cliched. There are moments where the score is very explicit in telling us that, okay, it's time to feel an emotion. There are hints of deeper themes like colonialism, respecting the land, the impact of greed, but none of it really goes anywhere too significant. There is a version of this film that leans a little bit harder into the existential horror of identity and memory, but instead it is kind of just a stylish sci-fi survival film, and it feels like the equivalent of a super violent, neon-drenched space survival horror video game, but in feature-length film form. But hey, a lot of people seem to really be into this, and that is amazing. If you want some cool visuals and violent sci-fi fun, then Ash is still for you. Thank you. Comment, subscribe, like, all those things are very nice things to do for me as a human being, so thank you. Watch the next one and have a great day. Cheers.